Dive into the mystery that envelops the ancient sacred texts, the story of Cain and his secret companion. Who was she? Are there perhaps other characters hidden in the shadows of the biblical narrative? Join us on a journey into the unknown, where veiled truths await to be discovered. Stay with us until the end to uncover the truth. Let's begin. According to the Bible, from the dust of the earth, Adam was formed, receiving the breath of life from God himself. From his side, in a deep sleep, Eve emerged. He passionately blessed them and exhorted them, "Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it," as narrated in Genesis 1:28. This reveals that the Creator granted them the gift of procreation and to fill the globe with their offspring. Thus, the scriptures show us that the entire human lineage descends from Adam and Eve, being them the initial progenitors. There is no biblical testimony of beings other than this ancestral line, neither previously nor subsequently. In fact, it is proclaimed that from one single blood essence, the divine shaped all human lineages to inhabit every corner of the globe, as testified in Acts 17:26. This implies that we all share a common ancestor and a single creator, uniting us in origin and destiny. Cain, the first son of Adam and Eve, has a story that arouses curiosity. Why is Cain's story controversial? Where did he emerge from? The explanation is surprisingly simple. Cain's wife was indeed his sister, and yes, you heard correctly, his sister. All descendants of Adam and Eve married among themselves, a practice that today might seem unusual or even reprehensible. But at that time, it was the only means to comply with the divine instruction to grow and multiply. There were no restrictions against marrying close relatives, nor concerns about genetic problems, since it was believed that humanity's original DNA was perfect, without flaws or mutations. The Bible recounts that Adam and Eve had many sons and daughters, not just Cain and Abel. According to Genesis 5:4, after the birth of Seth, Adam lived 800 more years, during which he had more offspring. This suggests that the first couple had at least 9 children, possibly many more. Cain found his wife among these siblings, and together they had Enoch, who gives his name to the city that Cain built, as narrated in Genesis 4:17. The genealogy of Adam and Eve clarifies that there are no human lines outside of theirs, debunking any theory about other humanities. We all descend from Adam and Eve, thus forming a large united family. This fact underscores a fundamental lesson about our existence. We are all equal before God and share the need for His protection and redemption. I will delve deeper into this topic later. So far, we understand that all humanity comes from Adam and Eve, who had many children, including Cain's wife. In those ancient times, marrying among siblings was common and necessary to follow God's order to multiply and populate the earth. However, the question arises, what changed later? How did the descendants of Adam and Eve develop, and when and why did it start to be considered wrong to marry close relatives? According to the Bible, Adam and Eve had 2 sons, Cain and Abel. Cain, driven by envy and anger, committed the first murder in history by killing Abel. As punishment, God sentenced him to wander far from his presence. Cain moved to the land of Nod, east of Eden, marrying his sister with whom he had a son named Enoch. Cain also built a city, which he named Enoch in honor of his son. Among Cain's descendants was Lamech, known for being the first polygamist and the second murderer mentioned in the Bible, according to Genesis 4:1-24. Abel, for his loyalty and love towards God, became the first martyr. Unlike Cain, who offered only part of his crops, Abel dedicated the best of his flock to God. This attitude of Abel, marked by his integrity, was recognized by God, who honored him. The Bible does not list direct descendants of Abel, but according to Hebrews 11:13, which speaks of the faithful who lived by their faith to the end, suggesting the possibility that Abel lived a life of deep faith. Adam and Eve had another son, Seth. His arrival symbolized the continuation of humanity, offering a new possibility for the offspring to fulfill the divine plan on earth. Thus, Seth became the symbol of hope, marking the beginning of human recovery and salvation after the conflicts and tragedies that marked the first chapters of our ancestral history. The name Seth, which means placed or appointed, indicates his role as the chosen successor by God to continue the line of the righteous. From Seth descends Noah, who with his family was the only one to survive the flood intended to purify the earth. This lineage then extended through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who are considered the founders of the people of Israel. The genealogy reaches Joseph, the husband of Mary and father of Jesus, the Savior of the world. This genealogical sequence is documented from Genesis 4:25 to Matthew 1:1-16. Although the scriptures do not detail all the names of the sons and daughters of Adam and Eve, it is suggested that the couple had more than 50 children, engendering more than 2,000 grandchildren. These first generations, united by direct blood ties, gave rise to the first families, tribes, and nations. At that time, marriage among siblings was not considered incest or sin, since there were no divine laws prohibiting it, nor genetic risks associated with such unions. It is worth noting that the primordial DNA of Adam and Eve was pure and without defects, along with the divine blessing to procreate healthy and robust offspring. This made marriage among siblings a practical necessity to obey the divine mandate to populate the earth. As time passed, sin and corruption began to diminish the original perfection of the human heart and its DNA. This led to the appearance of mutations and genetic defects, which marriage among close relatives could worsen. Therefore, God established clear rules against incest, dictated through Moses. In Leviticus 18, the people of Israel are instructed to avoid marriages between close relatives, marking a divine limit to preserve the holiness and purity of the people. God also specified family relationships that should not enter into marital or sexual bonds, including parents, children, siblings, and other relatives. These prohibitions, described as abominations in Leviticus 18:7-30, aim to maintain the health and holiness of his people, set them apart from the corrupt practices of neighboring nations, and protect the genealogical line from which Christ would be born. These laws mark to this day the basis of sexual morality in Christianity. However, the question arises about marriages between close relatives recorded in the Bible after the promulgation of these laws. Don't these constitute cases of incest? The reality is that not all marriages between close relatives violate the biblical definition of incest. Some were explicitly allowed by God. For example, Abraham married his half-sister Sarah, a union prior to the Levitical laws, therefore not considered incestuous. Additionally, this union was blessed by God, who granted them a son, Isaac, ancestor of Jacob and founder of Israel. Isaac, in turn, married his cousin Rebekah, a relationship not prohibited by Leviticus and therefore not classified as incestuous. At that time, marriage between cousins was a common practice, even accepted in some contemporary cultures. God blessed this union with two sons, Esau and Jacob. Jacob, following this tradition, married his cousins Leah and Rachel. This fact was also not considered incest because of the same reasons previously mentioned. Additionally, Jacob married two sisters, a practice that today would be seen as very frowned upon and disgusting. but which in his time was a tolerated custom, although not explicitly approved by God. Later, God showered blessings on Jacob along with his consorts, granting them 12 sons, who became the pillars of the 12 tribes of Israel. Amram, marrying his aunt Jochebed, crossed the limits allowed, according to the Levitical prescriptions that forbid marriages between uncle and niece. Nevertheless, divine clemency manifested in Amram and Jochebed, blessing them with Moses, the emancipator of Israel, the prophet chosen to receive the tablets of the law on Sinai. Another character is Lot, who, in a regrettable act, consummated union with his daughters, transgressing the norms established in Leviticus that prohibit relations between father and daughter. This act, repugnant after the annihilation of Sodom and Gomorrah, did not have divine approval, although from such a union emerged Moab and Ammon, lineages adversarial to Israel. Judah, for his part, incurred the bed of his daughter-in-law Tamar, an act equally prescribed and considered incestuous. However, this deception, motivated by the laziness and falsehood of Judah to evade the levirate law, led to the conception of Pharez and Zerah, ancestors of King David. Amnon, yielding to unrestrained desire, violated his sister Tamar, a violation of the Levitical commands that condemn fraternal unions. This vile action, driven by greed and nefarious advice, was reproved by God, who allowed Absalom, Tamar's brother, to execute vengeance, unleashing a fratricidal strife against his progenitor, David, king of Israel. The scripture, far from hiding or justifying these transgressions, reveals them frankly, illustrating the dramatic repercussions of incest in the lives affected and their descendants. It instructs us about the sinful nature of incest, contrary to the divine designs for marital union and family structure. It reminds us, firmly, that marriage should be celebrated between individuals without kinship, in a framework of mutual love and respect as conceived by divinity. But what have been the sequelae of incest throughout human history? What congenital conditions emerge from such unions? The Bible warns us that incest, by disobeying and showing free will of the natural order established by God, carries adverse consequences for those involved and their descendants, including shame, violence, curse, illness, and death. Also, it affects genetic integrity, increasing the risk of congenital pathologies and many other disorders attributable to the shared genetic heritage by close relatives. These genetic conditions can severely harm the health of newborns, even leading to their premature death. Therefore, God established laws against incest and drew clear lines for marriages between non-close relatives, seeking to protect the health and holiness of his people. God, who sees deep into hearts, understood that sin and corruption had infiltrated human nature, leading to genetic deterioration with mutations and anomalies as a result. Aware that these genetic problems could worsen in consanguineous families, God imposed clear restrictions against incest. But the question arises, why did God modify his precepts over time, previously allowing incest and then prohibiting it? Doesn't this seem contradictory? In reality, God did not change his laws, he adapted them according to the needs and contexts of his people. He is eternal and unchangeable, basing his decrees on eternal principles. Even so, as a God of love and mercy, he deeply understands his children and knows what best suits them at different moments in history. God revealed his word and will gradually adapting to the comprehension capacity of his people over time. This revelation was not delivered all at once, but unveiled step by step through nature, personal intuition, prophets, miracles, laws, and agreements. This evolutionary process led teachings from the basics to the complex, transforming broad directives into specific commands and moving from the tangible to the spiritually profound. The culmination of this revelation is Jesus Christ, the Word made flesh, who shows us concretely the invisible God and completes our understanding of the faith. At the beginning of humanity, God allowed incest so that his descendants would populate the earth, taking advantage of the perfect DNA of Adam and Eve, free of mutations or defects. However, this permissiveness ended when sin spread corruption throughout the world, affecting human nature and damaging the genetic code. This resulted in mutations and genetic anomalies. However, what was the fate of Cain and his wife after their transgression? Although Cain and his descendants were marked by morally questionable actions, God did not leave them without hope or protection. In Genesis 4:15, it is told that God placed a mark on Cain, warning that anyone who tried to harm him would suffer divine vengeance. This indicates that God offered Cain a chance to amend his ways and seek his mercy. Although Cain's legacy was tainted by evil, he and his descendants were also innovators in various disciplines such as music, metallurgy, and agriculture, contributing to the early advances of civilization and culture. This analysis shows us, according to the Bible, how all humanity descends from a single origin, Adam and Eve. In the beginning, unions among siblings were necessary and allowed to fulfill the divine mandate of population and growth. Over time, this situation changed. God established specific matrimonial norms to protect both the physical and spiritual health of his people. Additionally, we have seen cases of marriages between relatives in the Bible and how these were evaluated by God, reflecting his will and purpose. This journey through biblical teachings about incest illustrates the evolution of divine norms in response to the needs and circumstances of humanity. I hope this exploration has enriched your understanding and strengthened your faith. If you found it useful, I invite you to share your reflections, comment, and subscribe to discover more uplifting content. Until our next meeting, and may God's blessing be with you.